Hello, this is Christian Takushi at the Geopolitical Economics. Welcome to this beautiful spring evening 2015 on Lake Geneva. You might be able to hear the birds singing actually. Today we have a special on geopolitics, the global geopolitical situation. And the focus today is Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East. Yes, there is a very big connection between the Ukraine crisis and the Middle East. And our view may surprise some of you, because what we are analyzing and researching at Geopolitical Economics is really running counter the mainstream narrative out there. And we hope that our independent view will add value to you. It's not about us being right or you being wrong or mainstream narrative being right or wrong. It's about you having an additional perspective that may add value to you one way or the other. That's our hope. I will go straight to the point. We believe that the situation we're seeing now in the Ukraine is something that started in the year 2000, roughly around the year 2000. It's been waiting to happen, and we believe that the West has as much responsibility for it than does Russia. We also believe there is a very strong connection between what is happening there and in the Middle East. To go straight to the point, our analysis and what we monitor for years is that the United States is trying to court and win over Russia's key allies in the Middle East. The Obama administration wants Russia's key allies in the Middle East, not just Iran. But you cannot win Russia's allies in the Middle East, court them and win them over without neutralizing Russia first. And therefore the United States had to wait until Russia would feel really encircled. Yes, NATO and the EU have been expanding territorially relentlessly for the last 15 years. Since the end of the Cold War, we have been expanding into the former Soviet space, encircling Russia more and more. And the mere fact that we started expanding into the former Soviet space broke our promise to Mr. Gorbachev and to the Russians. We gave them a promise that if they pull out their troops out of Eastern Europe, we, the West, we will not expand into the vacuum. We will not expand into Eastern Europe. We will respect that as a buffer between the West and Russia. And it is sad that when the Soviet Union collapsed, our leaders and intelligence officers felt that, not all of them, but many of them felt, Russia is so weak, we don't need to worry about our promise. Why don't we expand? And of course, you visit them, this government, say, okay, please come, we want to join you. The fact is that we broke our word versus the Russians believe in Russia, we will never rise again. So we will never have to worry about the consequences of that. The way we treated Russia, also in the Kosovo question, caused an uproar within Russia and allowed Mr. Putin to rise to power. Yes, when we in the West criticize Mr. Putin, we should be reminding ourselves that we in the West have a lot to do with the fact that Mr. Putin came to power. And the way we have been expanding territorially into Eastern Europe to the point that we are encircling Russia and making many Russians feel encircled has allowed Mr. Putin to stay in power too. So when we analyze Russian domestic politics, we should take a step back and look at the big picture and see our role in that. Coming back to the Ukraine and the Middle East, I believe that by the year 2012, the United States intelligence services knew that the encircling of Russia had advanced well enough for the next move. should one of the key neighbors of Russia, Georgia or Ukraine, be destabilized, Russia, feeling encircled already, will have to react very tacitly, very strongly. And this is, I believe, where Russian intelligence services were outsmarted. I believe that Mr. Putin was not aware of this grand strategy of NATO or the United States. I believe that he went into Ukraine trying to save whatever can be saved without realizing that the real showdown was not in Ukraine. Ukraine was just a sideshow. The real theater was the Middle East. Over the last 2.5 years, Russia has been so absorbed with the Ukraine, it could not really take care of its strategic interests in the Middle East. And as a result, Russia has suffered. Russia has lost already the control it used to have on its former allies in the Middle East. The United States has successfully approached and courted Russia's former allies. As you may remember, some of you may not remember, but Iraq used to be a key ally of Russia. So was Syria and Iran, to mention just a few. Today, Iraq is in firm US hand. Syria is still out there disputed, but Iran is entertaining peace talks with the United States. How did we make sure that Iran will really come to the table? Well, we also, here comes US monetary policy and oil strategy. The Obama administration has been driving down the price of oil by pushing a tremendous expansion in capacity and gas and oil in the United States. That aggressive capacity expansion has allowed for a collapse in global prices. By doing that, the United States achieved a few targets at the same time. They put countries that had become very belligerent and aggressive against the United States into a more neutral space. What do I mean? The United States could neutralize Brazil, Venezuela, Iran, Russia to a certain extent, and even internally Texas. Yes, oil-producing economies came under tremendous pressure, especially Iran. And Iran was brought almost to its knees economically and politically. So the leaders in Iran had no other choice but to come to the table and discuss with the US the terms of a peace treaty. That's what is going on over the last 2 years. And I can reassure you completely that the current talks between the West and Iran wouldn't be taking place if Russia was fully alert and free to look after its own interests in the Middle East and Iran. Russia can't. Russia is too busy dealing with the crisis at home and on its doorsteps in the Ukraine. Because the crisis in the Ukraine has touched the heart of many Russians too. We're talking about brothers to them, brothers fighting one another. And I think that Russia, at least the leaders of Russia, were caught a little bit by surprise. Only in recent months they have realized the full extent of what's really happened. They actually went into Ukraine trying to save whatever they could save, knowing that they would probably only lose. I would say so. They went there into Ukraine trying to save whatever could be saved, to limit their losses. Yes, I would say so. Russia could have not won anything by going into Ukraine. If you know about Russian history, you would know that Russia has always controlled one way or the other the Ukraine. Going into the Ukraine militarily doesn't make sense. Russia had no geopolitical, geostrategic or economic interest to go into Ukraine militarily. So what has happened, I believe, is a kind of limiting the losses. And finally, Russia has had to realize that it's been outsmarted in the Middle East. Russia now in recent months is trying to actually to retake the initiative in the Middle East and actually protect its interests. What we're seeing actually is now Iran taking advantage of that, because Iran is now being courted by both the United States and a more reassured Russia. Yes, especially in Russia in the last 2 or 3 months has been neutralizing, I would say stabilizing a little bit more. It doesn't look as I would say as horrible as it did 4 or 5 months ago. Internally, I'm talking about monetarily and economically. There is some stabilization out there. Well, going back to U.S. monetary policy, I believe that's also part of this strategy. The United States is able to use its monetary and energy policy to advance its geostrategic or geopolitical interests overseas. And they are doing it very effectively. By the way, they are not the only ones doing that. The Russians do that, the Chinese do that, other countries do that. The EU does it too in its own ways, with its own possibilities. So I would like just to summarize. The situation in the Ukraine is a bit more complex than what it seems. I believe there is not such a thing as a Cold War being reignited between Russia and the United States. I don't believe that the US administration hates Russia. I believe that what the US is doing in Russia is a necessary, what the US is doing in Ukraine is being necessary to keep the Russians busy at home in order to actually reshuffle the landscape of the Middle East. And we in Europe should not think that the Americans and the Russians are again bringing trouble to the world. One of the key reasons why the United States has been forced to approach Iran is Europe. Europe has dramatically neglected to look after its energy and geopolitical interests. Europe cannot defend herself. Many of the military divisions that you see on TV or in some books exist only on paper. Europe has reduced its military much more than what you think or what we think. Europe cannot defend herself. Europe has not prepared a proper energy policy or strategy. And our nuclear security is at risk. Europe doesn't even have a proper backup plan for energy supplies. Since the start of this crisis in the Ukraine, many have realized how precarious the situation in Europe is. Because of Europe's lack of preparation strategically, geopolitically, and energy-wise, the United States has had to find a new source or backup source for gas and oil for Europe and NATO, and that is Iran. I believe that the United States and NATO are eyeing the huge gas and oil supplies reserves in Iran. Those gas and oil supplies could in the future flow through northern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, straight into Romania, where big hubs are being constructed. From there, Iranian gas or oil could flow to the rest of Europe. And you see, things are a little bit more complex. When you take a step back and take also a look at history, and when we also avoid trying to treat one party as evil or as good, when we start dividing a conflict between evil parties and good parties, we end up having, I would say, one-sided views. If I can finalize with these words, many countries, many nations are responsible for the situation in the Ukraine, which, by the way, is a tragedy. Many countries are involved, and we in Europe have something to do with it. We have been expanding into the former Soviet space, provoking Russia, making the Russians feeling insecure and encircled, and we have failed to prepare a proper energy strategy for the future. At the moment, the United States is helping Europe with a new strategy for the Middle East, a reshuffling of the landscape of the Middle East. The United States is downgrading its own allies in the Middle East, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel in order to court and win over Iran. Yes, that is the strategic importance of this Iran-US or Iran-West rapprochement. It's coming at a big price. As a result, Arab states like Saudi Arabia are going to probably arm themselves with nuclear weapons because they don't trust Iran. If you live in the Middle East and you hear every week how Iranian leaders are threatening their Arab neighbors in Israel, you will probably understand why many Arab states are shocked the United States is willing to embrace Iran. Iran hasn't unfortunately detracted from its views. It hasn't taken back its threats of destroying Sunni Arab states or destroying Israel. As a matter of fact, not long ago, Saudi Arabia asked Israel to bomb the nuclear installations of Iran. The situation has gone that far that the Saudi Arabian and other Arab Sunni states are now considering arming themselves with nuclear weapons. What is going on in the Middle East and the Ukraine are connected. And please do not believe that because we can sign a peace treaty with Iran, the situation in the Middle East is going to improve substantially. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the case. I believe that our policies are also very risky. We are downgrading the security for many Sunni Arab states. We're downgrading the security of Israel too. And as a result, many Arab states may have to defend themselves. And as you may know, I've been predicting for many years massive destabilization in the Middle East, a big war in the Middle East. And as you may also know, I've been predicting that Israel will sign a major peace treaty with its neighbors. And I believe that Turkey is going to be a big driver of that peace treaty. And I also believe that Israel, in the coming years, is going to rebuild its third temple. They're going to rebuild their famous temple from the times of King Solomon, the son of King David. That ancient temple that was destroyed by foreign forces, and for the last time also by Roman legions. The Israelis will probably rebuild in the coming years. These are some of our assumptions and some of our predictions, and I believe those events are going to have very big reverberations and implications for global economic outlook and investment outlook too. And as you may know, for many years we've been expecting a much stronger Swiss franc based on our analysis, which is geopolitical and economic research together. When we put economic and geopolitical research together, we're convinced the Swiss franc has still quite some upside. And we also believe that the world is headed for a major currency reform. Yes, a global currency reform is coming, and when that comes, we're going to see also a major transfer of wealth. Yes, a massive wealth transfer. These are some of the predictions that we have on the table. Of course, these are not written in stone. We are constantly updating our analysis, constantly updating our geopolitical and economic assumptions, and we are also anytime ready to make some changes or adjustments to it. Don't forget, please, any global geopolitical and macroeconomic research is highly complex and subject to changes, alterations. So please also take our analysis with a bit of caution. Get also other opinions and build your own opinion, and get other views, other perspective before taking any important decisions for yourself. Our main goal is to provide an independent, objective as it can be, view on the world, an outlook for the world that has an economic, geopolitical, and investment strategy facet to it. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I really hope that I have added value to you one way or the other. Good evening.